Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I want to start out by thanking everybody for coming. I know that there are a lot of options, a lot of things that are going on in the city right now, and I appreciate you coming to Startup Grind tonight. You probably have heard a little bit about what it is that we're doing, but I want to touch on a few things before we bring Taylor in here and get this started. Startup Grind is a global community, and we're here to help educate and inspire entrepreneurs. There are 85 chapters across the world. We're in 35 different countries, and each month we hold events just like this where we bring in entrepreneurs and let them tell their startup grind. So that's what we're about here. That's what we're doing tonight. We'll do these events monthly, so definitely check it out and see who's going to be on the roster. I'll give a little bit more information about our next upcoming event that we'll have in May at the end of the night. And I'll talk about some of our sponsors and that type of thing. But I want to introduce Jeremy. He's going to actually handle our interview tonight, and I'm sure he's a little bit of a local celebrity, and most of you have seen him in a few different avenues here in Memphis. So he's so graciously come in and is going to handle the interview. But in Startup Grind fashion, I need everybody to stand up before we get started. And he's going to introduce Taylor, but let's welcome him with a round of applause.
So come on in, Taylor. You get to make your fancy.
I thought we were applauding you.
No, it's all for you.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm just here to make you look good.
All right.
All right, so Taylor is, when you talk about entrepreneurialism, he is a Memphian through and through, graduate of Christian Brothers High School. He's a Rhodes graduate. Go ahead and take a seat, actually. He's a graduate of the University of Memphis Law School, so you've covered a pretty wide spectrum just in that. But then he launched, as many of you know, Yolo, so Memphis's first frozen yogurt, and also to Chihuahua. You have Tampin Tap downtown, which is absolutely amazing in terms of coffee and local beer. Very eclectic restaurant. And then also, too, you're involved heavily with things like Make Memphis, you have Bounty on Broad, you have the truck stop, so there's a lot of things that we get to cover. It's funny, he and I we did a radio interview this morning, and we went 20 minutes like that, and we're thinking, okay, we could easily go for 2 or 3 hours here and have a lot of fun, so you're in for a treat. But with that, Taylor Berger. So give him another round of applause. And part of that applause is when you talk about Memphians making a difference, and this is where Make Memphis will tie into this later on, he really is a role model for someone that sees opportunity, but also, too, looks at issues and solutions and activates them. And he's also, too, a massive collaborator, which we'll talk about, which plays, obviously, a pivotal role in being an entrepreneur, but doing amazing things for Memphis. So from me to you, thank you for everything you do.
Thanks, Jeremy.
When you talk about being an entrepreneur, many times it starts as a young child and having crazy ideas and thinking, hey, wait a second, what about this? What if this? And so you yourself have that very story. Share with them a little bit about just growing up and seeing some of these ideas come to life, but not on your own accord, and then setting the stage for the future of Yolo.
Sure. I mean, the way things started for me, besides being that kid in school who would have an assignment, end up doing something completely wrong, like all the time, just because I understood things completely differently. I was very excited about it, but just would kind of mess them up. But, you know, always a lot of enthusiasm. And so that kind of went along, and finally in high school, I had a business class, and we were asked to come up with an idea and present it. I think I was a senior, and so I thought about it, and came up with an idea to create a mobile oil change service. So like when you're at school or at work, somebody's out there changing your oil, you ain't got to mess with it before or after work, you know. It's just one of those things that, how many of you have like 8,000 miles since your last, oil change? Like, it happens. And so, I was pretty fired up. I was going to do it, and I presented it, and, it's like, this is it. And I don't even have to go to college. Like, this is it. And I didn't do it. Basically, I started applying to school, and I went on vacation, and, one thing led to another. And I found myself a couple years later driving down Walnut Grove, and that billboard right before you get on the Union Viaduct, I saw City Slickers, mobile oil change service. We come to you. And so, yeah, it kind of got me, I remember thinking, well, who was in my class at Christian Mother?
That's always the first thought, right? Wait a second, that's why I did.
Somebody told their dad, and then they went and did
agreement.
it. And, I don't know that happened or not. I don't even know what happened to that business. I did a little bit of research, and I think they failed miserably. So anyway, but
then you had another one, though, too.
Yeah, so I went to Rhodes, and then I kind of was a waste of space for 4 years. But towards the end, I had an idea, and I wanted to create a coffee shop. And I wanted it to be called the Screen Porch, and it would be located right over there on McLean near Tutwiler. You may know where I'm going with this. But, this was back in '02. And, I had it all planned out. I had it sketched out. I was going to call one of my contractor friends, and we were going to get it done for like, $20,000, and it was going to be great. And that was going to be my job. But then I went on vacation. And I don't know, I got distracted, girls or something, and I didn't do it. And then I was in Idaho being crazy, and I heard about this woman, Kathy Bolden, who'd started a place called Cafe Eclectic, which, I'm sure you've all been to, and it's awesome and way better than I would have done, but beside the point. And, but I just remember thinking, gosh, like, what is the deal? This is really frustrating. And so I don't know. Those things made an impact on me. So that by the time I moved back from Idaho, went to University of Memphis Law School, I was kind of going through that. Didn't really have any great ideas through there. That was kind of a rough period. And then I started practicing law. And I was doing tax and estate planning. It frankly wasn't really that interesting. Important, but, like I don't even have a will right now. That's how much anyway, so I was visiting my then girlfriend, now wife, Allison, in February of 2009, or maybe it was 10, but she was out in Birmingham, and I remember eating dinner, and she's like, Taylor, we got to go to this new spot. It's this self-serve yogurt shop. It's like, Allison, it's 20 degrees outside. Why do you want ice cream? And she's like, no, just come on. So she took me, and, as we approach, like, there's people standing out front like it's a rave or something, and it's 20 degrees. People, the doors open all the time because there's a line out of it. We get in there, we wait, and, then we get the cup. And then I start to see why. Okay, this is fun. There's like 50 flavors of yogurt and, billion toppings I get to do myself. I weigh it. It's like $20. And I'm like, okay, there's something here. Yeah. And so I get back to her place. I'm Googling self-serve yogurt, Memphis. Like, okay, this is it. There's nobody doing this. It's going to happen. And if it ain't me, I'm freaking out. I swear it cannot happen again. This cannot be the third time. And so, that was it. It was kind of born out of that frustration of those times in high school and college that watching somebody else do something that I knew was a good idea. And so, this time I decided to make it different.
So talk about that first step. For those, I want to see a show of hands real fast. How many people think it stands for You Only Live Once? Versus yogurt local. There we go. Yeah, exactly. So talk about, though, where did you start? So you have the idea, you see, okay, this is something that's really interesting. This really could be a potential business. I could be the first one bringing it to Memphis. What was your next step in bringing it to life?
It was just, it was kind of like I was in love, because if you've been there, then you know how it is. That's all you can think about. So I was sitting there at work trying to dictate trusts and everything, and this is all I could think about. So, it was tough. But I'm calling people. I remember I called Mac Edwards. He's kind of a restaurant guy. I called a few other people that I knew had either done businesses or were in restaurants or and it's just trying to understand. I had no idea about food business or business really at all, or much less frozen yogurt, and just started learning as much as I could and calling people and talking to them until I could formulate a business plan, which essentially was, I wish I still had it, because it was like one page. And, it's like, it was envisioning the Aaron Way store. It was like, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be self-serve yogurt. It's good. It's going to be here, and here's the way it's going to be different, to your question, was, we're going to use, all the kind of, Jones Orchard strawberries and, Makeda's cookies and Groovy Foods granola and, all these things that already had a lot of Memphis buy-in, because I knew there was going to be an onslaught of competition, just like there was. And
I was going to ask, what is, when you're going through that process, and especially, and so, I mean, as many of you know, once you kind of get that first one on your belt, that learning curve becomes a little less dramatic, and then it becomes easier, especially because you build that network of people, too, that you can go back to and help create this together. What's maybe one bit of advice, that, especially when you're starting Yolo, that somebody gave you that you thought, wow, this is really helpful?
Read the book that the 37 Signals guys wrote, Rework. That was really helpful for me. It's kind of a tech-based, they're a tech company, but the kind of wisdom that's in that book, I mean, you can read it in like 45 minutes, was huge. It kind of confirmed or affirmed all the things that I thought, because a lot of people had told me, you need to write a business plan that's 50 pages long, and you need to do all this research and all this stuff. And in my gut, it's like, that's just spinning wheels. Like, I need to get this thing done. Like, I need to get it open, and we'll just do it however we need to do it. But let's just get it open, and we'll figure out the details. And honestly, I mean, that's kind of what that book said. And again, it was applied to different scenarios, but business is business. And I think that these days, that works. I mean, at least for me. I mean, if I had spent 6 months writing a business plan and thinking about it, just like I'd kind of done on those other two projects, just thinking, then somebody else would have done it first. And
it's funny because it's counterintuitive, but we talk about it from a nonprofit perspective all the time, is some of the most largest sums of money you'll ever get from donors and contributors come from the shortest emails, because you already have a relationship with them. You already have, so you don't have to sit there and spell it out. You don't need all that. You're creating action. You have a relationship, and all of a sudden, next thing you know. So in other words, brevity in a way is a really good thing, especially when it's based on action.
Yeah.
So talk about, you have a very distinct, when you talk about kind of the Taylor Berger experience, when you walk into Chihuahua, when you walk into Yolo, when you walk into Tampa and Tap, they have a certain feel. So it's customer service, it's local sourcing. Talk about when you're looking at these restaurants, and I know the answer a little bit based on the environment and kind of looking at the history and the present and the future where it's going, but talk about the experience you like to provide when you look at your locations.
Sure. I mean, all these businesses, like I said, I'm not a chef. I'm not a yogurt maker. I see, I try to see what everybody sees. It's the experience of going somewhere. It's a relief. I mean, whether you're spending $5 for a cup of yogurt or $20 for dinner, I mean, you just want that relief, that just release and just, fun place. And so, I mean, that's what we try to create. And, I've picked places, with the exception of like a couple. Aaron Way is a shopping center, but like that corner over there in Midtown that was an old convenience store that we turned into a Yolo, and then the place down in the Chicago Pizza Factory that became Chihuahua, and the downtown Tampa and Tap place. Like, all these were kind of unique places in neighborhoods that we just really wanted to kind of step away from and kind of let the bones of it speak, and just try to put ourselves in the position of a customer. I mean, what do you want to feel? What do you want to eat? What do you want to experience here? And I think that's what people want these days. I mean, I think people want places that feel authentic, that aren't so manufactured, because, that's why people move to cities now. I mean, you can pretty much live and work anywhere. I think people of our generation want to go places, that have a sense of history, and we don't want to live in the suburbs. We want real community, and that's what I've tried to create, with my food businesses.
You're doing a great job with that, if you don't mind me interject. Anytime it comes out of town or a foreigner, they always say the same thing. The United States looks the same. So what you're doing is really helping attack that whole, suburban cookie cutter, every single exit of the U.S. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Already getting praise. Look at that. So on your end, talk about collaboration, because with each of these you have partners that you go into, and to your, I mean, you said you're not a chef, you're not necessarily in this, but you know who to partner with, those professionals and those experts. So talk about collaboration and how that's played a pivotal role in bringing all these to fruition.
Sure. I mean, I try to operate with a lot of humility because I have to. Because I don't know a whole lot. What I'm kind of, my talent, if I have one, is finding talent, and listening to people and respecting their abilities, because I think that most people are really good at some things and really love some things, and if you can pull enough of those people into the same little sphere, then you can create a business. I mean, that's kind of what it's been about. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of what I've had to do by necessity, but it's a whole lot of fun too, because I mean that's where you get a lot of really cool ideas, is by talking to a lot of people in different industries. I mean, that's what I really like about my current job. Like, I basically get to try to bring people together to kind of create cool things. And to do that, I've got to talk with bankers and lawyers and construction guys and city planners and tech people and a lot of small business owners, and I mean, it's just fascinating, the kind of, I don't know, just electricity that comes from those interactions. So that's...
Where do you recommend, because this is something I think is pretty neat, and I'm a big believer in, when you start cross-pollinating, when you bring people from different industries and you start getting together and collaborating, amazing things happen. So where do you recommend for entrepreneurs that are in this sort of workspace together with Co-work Memphis, and they're sharing ideas, but getting outside of just other entrepreneurs, and they may be in other industries, but getting outside of that and meeting lawyers and doctors and bankers and those that would bring new ideas? Where do you recommend them starting?
Breakfast Club.
There you go. On Fox? No.
It's funny. I mean, because I'm much more of an introvert, so Breakfast Club is really hard for me. I don't really do that well in large groups of people. So the way that I do it is, if I see somebody that I think is doing something cool, I'll just find their number, shoot them a text or an email, and just ask for a meeting. I have coffee, because I find that that one-on-one meeting is better for me. I mean, that's just what fits my personality better. And I mean, most people are like, sure,
That's how you and I met. We just email each other,
exactly.
Have coffee, and there's no ulterior motive or anything other than just, hey, we want to get to know each other better, and let's see what ideas spring up. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, that's what works best for me. And in a town like Memphis, I mean, great thing about this place is that, I mean, generally everybody's really unpretentious and really open-minded. There's not a lot of clickiness and judgment and all that, and people are genuinely excited to be here. If we're here by choice. And we're all here, so let's talk. And I mean, that's really the attitude that I get from just about everybody that I've come in contact with.
Switching gears a little bit, talk about being the catalyst for the food trucks. So launching the Food Truck Association, but just once again seeing a need for our city and then doing something about it.
Sure. The City Council passed an ordinance in 2010 allowing food trucks to operate. But it was just a cluster at first. I mean, there was like 50 trucks, but they were all just kind of all over the place. And, but I had started to meet some of them again, because they're really cool, interesting folks, like super talented and really driven. And, they just didn't have a whole lot of capital to be able to open a restaurant. And so I just basically got the email list from the health department of all of them, and emailed them all and said, hey, let's meet up and see if we can kind of get on the same page. And so we did, and it was awesome and hot, and It was just, the energy in that room was amazing. But so we did. I mean, we started communicating, and we kind of formed an association, and you know, put up a website, and you know, now it's just rocking along. I'm not even involved anymore, but it's you know, it's a way that, you know, people can communicate. If you've got an event with, you need a food truck, now you have a website you can go to and call the different ones, or send an email to all of them. And you know, we can talk to each other and say, oh, don't go to Jeremy's event. No one will show up. You know, we can.
But that leads to, when you talk about taking that step and then piggybacking on that, because a lot of times it's the baby steps. It's taking this step that then leads to this step that then leads to this step, and next thing you know, you've got an amazing new opportunity. And so transition that into Truck Stop.
Sure. So from talking to the different guys and gals, that I started to see the problems of the food trucking life in Memphis. And, you know, we kind of solved the communication problem, but we still had the issue of, this is not a pedestrian city, so it's kind of tough to find a food truck, and it's tough to be a food truck because, you know, you don't have that reliable stream of people walking by. Right. And so that was a problem. Another problem was, you know, when a food truck did go out, you know, there's often a long line, and you probably waited in them before, and then you have to wait another 20 minutes after you order, and it's just kind of not fun because you're standing there and it's hot and, you know, all that, and then you really want a beer or a lemonade, and, you know, that's not there. And then there's no place to sit. So we kind of like looked at the food truck experience and tried to develop a solution. And that was Truck Stop. So down at Central and Cooper, we decided, let's make a centralized hub, you know, where they can come, and we'll have, you know, an easy way for customers to order. They can walk up to our bar and order from one thing from each food truck. No big deal. Then they go sit down, and it comes to them. That's kind of nice while they drink their beer. And
they have a seat.
They have a seat and some shade, maybe even some air conditioning. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, it was in talking to all those guys to see those problems and then be in a position to kind of find a solution and implement. I mean, I've been working on that project for 2.5 years before it finally, I found the right people, investors, to make it happen.
And is there anything like this in America? Like, are you copying anything or duplicating anything, or is this totally?
There's food truck parks, you know, where a bunch of food trucks gather, but again, that's the same. They've solved the first problem, but they haven't really addressed a lot of the other ones, mainly beer and air conditioning.
And there's a lot of neat things on the back end from a technology standpoint.
Yeah.
One purchase or one point of sale, and then on the back end, you're making it easy for the
Yeah.
trucks as well. So, okay, so transition, because like I said, he's involved in a million different things. So this is where the conversation, you can take it in, you know, so many different directions. But transition that over into Make Memphis. I mean, for those that aren't aware of what Make Memphis is, tell them a little bit about just the background of Make Memphis.
The background was just my frustration. First of all, it's just a kind of an informal group of people, but I mean, I got really frustrated about 6 months ago, kind of late November, early December. I was working on the Truck Stop deal. A lot of people, you know, I think you were at that meeting, a lot of people just really bashing it, you know. I'm just trying to do something I think is pretty good.
Isn't all rosy?
Yeah, like, you know, we're going to do this thing out of shipping containers, which is really cool architecture, and you know, but some people don't think it's pretty, you know, so they don't want it. And then some people think that food trucks are bad, and so they don't want it. And you know, and those few people tend to be so loud, you know, especially online. And then, you know, in real life too, they show up to the city council meetings, and you know, these few people, you know, really want to spoil it for the 99 of us who just want to have some fun and do some cool stuff in our city. And so I was just getting frustrated, you know, and because I lived in Seattle for a while, and I have friends in Nashville. I'm like, the vibe in those cities seemed more positive. You know, it seemed like people want each other to succeed, you know, rather than here. Sometimes it feels like, you know, we're just waiting for the next place to close, or, you know, we just kind of want everything to fail. And I know that's not the way it is. I know that because I know people. I know lots of people that are doing awesome things and supporting each other and hoping the city gets better. But again, it was just one of those dark times when you just hear the wrong voices, and I don't know, I almost wanted to just leave.
You put out a Facebook post.
Yeah, I put out a Facebook post just like that, just kind of venting, and people were just like, yeah, hell yeah! I mean, there's just this. I mean, I don't think I got as many likes on that when my daughter was born. It was like something crazy, like 250 likes and like 1 billion comments, and everybody's just, it was like, wow, we've really tapped into something here. Some other people feel this same thing. It's just, who are these people who are talking, these negative idiots who just want everything to fail? Let's just forget those guys. And so, I don't know, like a couple of days later, let's start a little Facebook group to, I don't know. I don't know. Let's just start a group of all you folks.
It's like, how funny is it that we're engaged in something that's, we're trying to add a formal piece to something that's supposed to be informal or something along those lines.
Well, that was a little bit later because it's like, let's just start a Facebook group and who knows. So people started joining it like crazy, and then it was like 700 people in like 4 days, and then one of the commercial appeal reporters called. Let's do a little story, and then he did a little story on it, and then it just blew up. There's like 2,000 people, and and then so I was like, whoa, what am I going to do? like all these people in this group, like, what are we going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah, and
you're known for action, you got to act.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, there's some enthusiasm here. Let's do something. So, it's still evolving. But, I think what the idea of that group, what I want it to be and what I hope it becomes is a way to help people move their ideas into action. Because I think that's what I'm good at and that's what I enjoy helping people with. But I've got a limited bandwidth. I mean, I help as many folks as I can, but, and I want to help some of them, but if we can kind of make that start happening more, at least kind of moving people into, there's a lot of organizations that already kind of do that. Livable Memphis is one of them that's doing some, real big things. If we can kind of get those 2,000 people to take ownership of projects, no matter how small or how large, and kind of move them into the pipeline of action, the city starts to change. Right. From the ground up, and that's what I want it to be, and that's happening. There's we had a kind of a pitch meeting a couple months ago. People came together, and there's some really good ideas pitched, and I've gotten some support and met other people just like that. One of them
was Tommy Pacello walking around with, how cool would it be to activate the Tennessee Brewery, right?
Yeah.
Which is a perfect segue into Tennessee Brewery on
right?
Yeah.
He, Tommy Pacello is another Memphis guy. He works at the Mayor's Innovation Delivery Team. So they had done these things, MemShop, MemFix, over at Broad and North Memphis, and not North Memphis yet, but
Soulsville.
Yeah, had some success there, and it was right about the time when that article came out that the Tennessee Brewery was going to be demolished. And if y'all don't know, that's that really castle-looking building downtown on Tennessee Street that used to be the place of manufacture for Goldcrest beer. And it's been vacant for like almost 60 years. And finally the owners, after seeing, just pitch after pitch of crazy, monstrous development ideas that always fell through because of financing, said, look, we're just going to demolish it and build some houses or something. And so Tommy and others started talking about, well, what can we do? And he thought about, well, let's apply that model of what he calls, and we're calling pre-vitalization, what they did for Broad. Well, let's act like it was bustling and see what happens. Let's open up some boarded up shop fronts and put entrepreneurs in them, and let's have a little festival thing on the street, and let's get people thinking about this place differently. You know, they thought for years about Broad as, you know, kind of run down, scuzzy place where you might could, you know, get a dime bag, but not a whole lot else. And so, but once they did that, once they kind of got people there to experience it and started seeing it differently, you know, there's been like $20 million of investment, really small piece investment in that community. And it's changed it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, we kind of applied that model to that building downtown.
And it's neat. I want to go into detail on that a little bit because you yourself are going in there, rolling up your sleeves, and when you talk about activating this, I mean, you're sweeping the floors, you're building the chairs and the tables and everything. So I mean, he's putting manual hours into this, which, you know, I mean, that's a big part of this is when you talk about, yeah, I mean, it's a ton of people going in there, but when you talk about, you know, bringing an idea to life, it's a lot of hard work. I mean, pitching in and then collaborating, to your point, is bringing together a team of people that believe in it, that there's no money in this. I mean, it's all for the right reasons in terms of giving our city, this is what it could be. Give them a little flavor of just, I mean, because you've got live music going in there, you've got obviously beer, so I mean, it's a beer garden. Give them a little bit of an idea of just what it's going to be.
Sure. But I mean, first to your point, I mean, the collaboration and the hands dirty stuff, I mean, that's fun. I mean, I remember, just to backtrack to Yolo, like, when I opened it, I was still practicing law, and about 2 weeks into it, I basically had a mental breakdown, like at the store. I was trying to fix some music, and it was like the opening day of Aaron Way, and there was, you know, toppings on it. You know, it was just a mess, and I started freaking out, and I was like sobbing and kind of laughing at myself at the same time. I had to evacuate, and just like, I mean, it was bad because I hadn't slept. You know, I was trying to practice law in the day and open this business, and you know, so like I think within a couple of days of that, regaining my composure, I quit practicing law, and I just cut the net, and it was really scary. But the day after I did it, I knew that was the right decision just because it felt so right. I was driving to the hardware store, drinking coffee at like 6 a.m., thinking I don't have to go back to the office. Like, I don't have to do, I just do what I think is going to be important. And so, I mean, that's a feeling and in a way that, you know, I hold on to and just really value the being able to get out there and collaborate with people and work with my hands. I remember, you know, tearing up boxers behind Yolo, thinking this is so much better than than drafting trusts and you know.
But that's got to be a little bit of a scary. I mean, to the standpoint of going from a lawyer where everything is billable by the minute for the most part, you know, 6-minute increments, and having, you know, the 401k and the stock options and this sort of life, and then all of a sudden cutting that net and saying, okay, wait a second. This is the path I'm going to go. And it might be a little scary and crazy, but now I'm in charge of my own destiny. What was that like in terms of mentally shuffling through that? Yeah.
I mean, it was really hard to come to that decision, you know, but I talked to others, you know, and everybody I talked to who had kind of made that transition was happy with it, you know. I talked to CPAs who now own businesses, just a lot of small business owners, and you know, nobody, you know, even though they had struggles and, you know, tough times, nobody regretted it. So that was probably that, and my wife being like, "You don't like practicing law." Those two things, it's like, fine, let's just do it. But yeah, I mean, it's scary, but if you want to do it, you got to cut the net at some point. And I don't think that there's a lot of folks who, you know, are laying there on their deathbed regretting that they took more risks. You know, I think that life is really short. And if I was still practicing law, I'd be miserable, you know?
At what point, because everybody's a little different on the stage, so many entrepreneurs, and many of you probably have a full-time job, and then you've got the idea on the side. And so you mentor, obviously, a ton with StartCo and other entrepreneurs yourself, and it's hilarious because he'll actually set up in the coffee shop, and he'll just sit there and be like, all right, who's my meeting for today? You know, just like he'll line them up and just one after the other, and then you'll put out like, hey, I'm here from here to here, so anybody that shows up, just throw me questions. And so you do a lot of snapshot mentoring. But for those that have an idea but a full-time job, when do you start advising them on, okay, now is the right time? Because obviously, this is a vague question in a way because it's going to vary with each person. But when do you start saying, okay, now is the time to start thinking about cutting that cord and really focusing? Because I think one of the challenges, so many people, they've got this idea and they want to put 100% in, but all of a sudden if they cut that cord, they don't have the financial means to support their family or the idea. So it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
I don't know. I hesitate to tell anybody exactly what to do. I just know that my experience was I needed some real traction. I mean, it wasn't just, I got the funding. I mean, it was more. I got the place open,
So it's
I
real
think,
at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I needed some real traction. And I think, and I didn't even have children at that point, so I might have waited longer now that I have children, but I don't know. I mean, everybody's got a different situation. I mean, if you're a single young person and you have, nothing but student loan debt, who cares? What do you have to lose? I mean, but if you got a house and things are different.
Responsibilities and bills.
Yeah. There's a spectrum of life that there's no clear answer. You just got to feel right.
Say, do it right after you graduate college, before you get married, before you have kids. That's actually really good.
Pretty good time for it, because you'll probably fail, but that's okay. You can do something else, Like I said, the ideas are a dime a dozen, right? I mean, it's whether you're willing to go with it and actually do the work with it. If you are, like I said, you'll probably pick a really crappy idea first. Like if I picked the oil, probably would have failed, but I would have learned a ton, And Yolo's had some failures. We opened stores in other cities that just plopped, But now I have a much keener eye for real estate, and for retail because of that. And that's the bright side. I mean, downside is financially disastrous. But once you pick to go with something, you're going to fail some. But once you kind of cut that net, you tend to find a way to persevere.
So I want to come back to the ideas are a dime a dozen, and action is the clarification part of it. But what's your biggest challenge? Like when you say, in terms of the biggest challenge that I overcame, what was the biggest challenge you think? Or what's one of the biggest challenges? First one that comes to mind.
I don't know. I mean, it's all such a blur and a.
All right, what do you think was the biggest mistake so far that you've made?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistake, was trying to grow too fast. I have a tendency to want to do too much, and that's just probably going to be the way I am all my life. But we grew Yolo too fast, and we didn't have the infrastructure, the experience to do it, and we didn't, look at the markets we went into closely enough, and we just assumed that because it worked in the great spots that we picked first, that it would work everywhere, and it just didn't. And so, that stuff hurt.
Outside of your family, what's made you the most proud so far?
I don't know. I feel like I have had a bit of an impact in the city. I feel like I've created some cool places, and I feel like I've got, all these relationships now that are going to make it so much easier and more fun to continue doing it. And so, I mean, I'm proud of the relationships that I've built, and through the places that we've created.
And so one of the things is you can tell he's highly ambitious, competitive, which I think is a DNA as well for entrepreneurs. Carry that forward into, you're wanting to do so much for Memphis. You thought about running for political office. And so, a big part of that then is the self-analysis, especially with your wife saying, hey, wait a second here, you've got family, you've got so much going on. wait a second, maybe even though you want to make your mark, let's back up a little bit and do it in more strategic ways. Talk about just that experience of wanting to put yourself in that position to make a difference in a possibly a greater way from a political standpoint, but in reality, the gut check of, hey, wait a second, I can do so much more in the role that I'm in doing greater things over here, more so than maybe over here. Explain what was going through your head in that thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of recognize that we have a really strong nonprofit, world in Memphis, a really strong business sector, and then, it just seemed like we need some help politically. I looked at the other cities like Dallas and Nashville and Atlanta just rocking along. It's like, well, maybe that's the issue. Like, maybe the political thing. Like, well, I'll get involved, and I just completely underestimated what political life takes. If you've ever considered it, just know that it's more than full time. Just like, it's, it just completely changes things.
In politics by nature, it's funny because most business leaders, they want to be involved in some sort of political role. But the reality is once you get into it, you realize, wait a second, politics by the very nature is polarizing. So it's like 50%, you could be the most helpful person in the world and doing the greatest good, but yet 50% are going to hate you because you might be Democrat or Republican or one way or the other. And so the reality is you start self-evaluating, wait a second, I like being the hero, I like being able to do, and I can do so much good over here in my own sphere of influence versus having to take this role where, you're not necessarily, you don't have the same clout from a business perspective.
Yeah, and like we've been talking about, the way that I've been able to be, have a modicum of success is through relationships with just a broad swath of people. And, once you kind of start down the political path, you can start to alienate people, and then you're more limited in what you can do. And it takes a special person, you kind of got to martyr yourself in a way to take that path, and we need people to do it. And it's just, we desperately need people to do it. Young people, at least for me, it's not me right now. It's not
maybe
there.
In the future. But okay, so as we wrap this up, I think one of the things I do want to go back to, because we see it in our world all the time. When you talk about the Lipscomb Pitts Breakfast Club, we see ideas left and right. And even the other day, someone was saying, well, I've got this idea and this idea. And one of the big things with you, which I appreciate, is you see ideas coming left and right at you all the time. And you're a big believer where it's like, look, there's a million ideas. Just because you have an idea doesn't really mean diddly squat. It's how do you actually activate that? How are you bringing it to life now? Because that's the first question he's going to ask you is, if you don't have a track record of success, if you don't have something that you're building, you're not going to get investment. You're not going to get people to collaborate and help. You've got to show yourself rolling up your sleeves and making it come to life. Talk about just your philosophy around, ideas being a dime a dozen, and action is actually what creates clarity, but also too what wins support.
Yeah, that's the way I've been able to have any kind of success, is just by trying to get stuff done. And then once you have the littlest thing, even just a frozen yogurt shop or an app or whatever, at least you can point to that, and then when you got something, it's a lot easier to make something else happen. And because that's what people respect, and that's what people can identify with. And when they can sink their teeth into something, see something, they are a lot more likely to support you. And just trying to sell somebody on your idea is hard. It's just got to be the right fit. But if you can show that I've done this, I've done that, it's a lot easier.
Well, people like supporting a winner. You're a winner. So obviously, let's give Taylor Berger a round of applause real fast. So obviously, we've covered a huge spectrum between frozen yogurt, Yolo, Chihuahua, Tampa Tap, Tennessee Brewery Untapped, the Food Truck Association, truck stops. You've got the food truck. You've covered a huge spectrum right there. But obviously, you have tons of questions. So let's hear some questions. Now's your chance to rapid fire with Taylor and ask any question you want. So, who's got a question? I know you guys have.
Well, what are some folks working on in here? Can we turn it around for a second?
Yeah, let's do it. If that's okay. Let's give us a little bit of an idea.
You're good.
Throw it on the audience. We want to hear from you now.
But seriously, I mean, who works here? Who works out of this space? Anybody?
You got some, all right.
I mean, is anybody here working on a project, trying to get out of their day job? Yeah.
Well, since you asked me about saying I'm gonna step up. I actually was laid off as a teacher after 10 years, and I've been doing graphic design on the side. I have a couple babies. I got a question too. So a couple of my projects are I'm doing graphic design, small, a couple small accounts. I got a documentary on Memphis basketball, the history of Memphis basketball. I'm working on. Also, I've been doing the work for what I call Ego Academy, which is a nonprofit where we do test-taking skills and things of that nature. I'm trying to get that going too. My question was, though, my wife, who actually is over there, she, I don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but it seems like some people like yourself are able to, conquer this and that and this. So I want to know, what was that like? But that's what I'm working on right now.
So I'll repeat it, I know, for the microphone. The reality is, the question really comes down to is being an expert in one area or a jack of all trades. Talk about that balance.
Sure, I'm definitely not really a master of much. I'm just kind of ADD when it comes to things. I'm really curious. I want to learn a little bit about everything. And I'm not even a jack, but I like a lot of trades. Like it's fascinating to me to watch my electrician work, as it is to talk to the IT guy. It just kind of fulfills my innate curiosity. That's one of the great things about small business is that you get to have your hands in a lot of different areas. And there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. That's kind of what an entrepreneur is. I mean, they're a convener of experts.
I'm also curious. I like to use that word because every entrepreneur I know is curious. So they do their own research. They like to be involved in everything. They like to know a little bit of everything, but they're really curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what leads to the talking to people, and that's how the ideas happen. That's curiosity. I think that's probably what I was when I was really young, and why I misinterpreted most assignments, because it just kind of got distracted with other things. But I mean, your wife, assuming she knows you as well as my wife knows me, she knows who you are, and I mean, it's just going to have to take you for what you are, and and I don't think a lot. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are just really awesome at one thing, and they built a business around that one thing. But there's others who just kind of can convene the right people to create great companies.
And you talked about being, a graphic artist and doing stories and movies and documentaries, and the other thing of this that I see a lot with people that have good ideas, and especially at the ground level. So they've either got a job or they've lost their job, and they're trying to invest all their time and effort, and they might not be a very proficient graphic artist, but they know they've got to have something here, and so they teach themselves enough of the basics to get it going. But then they're able to catapult and actually build it enough to where they can recruit somebody that's actually better and an expert in that area to then take it on. But you kind of have to figure out, though, your core. Like, what is the core asset that you bring to the table? Because I know we've got some entrepreneurs here that I know, very well. But the reality is, even if you have that idea, you have to surround yourself with the right people. But then you still have to figure out, what's my ownership in this project? What are the things that I can do to get it going? But then ultimately, what are the things that I can farm out to others as it expands, to win their trust and take it to a whole new level? Mm-hmm. What's your view on that in terms of, you're looking at, because here's what's interesting to me is, I asked you, like, what do you think your core competency is? What do you think you're really good at? Tell them what you told me.
Oh, well, that was a little bit different. You
were
asking,
it's kind of an interesting conversation.
What I end up talking, because we mentioned earlier, I end up talking to a lot of different people, and I tell them, a lot of them are like garden business owners, and what I know about that they don't happens to be like digital media marketing. I'm like decent at that. I understand that pretty well, and they oftentimes, that's what they don't understand. They understand deeply their product and their customer, but they don't really know how to reach them outside of the store, you know. And so I end up talking about that. But you know, I mean,
I just think it's an interesting, you know, when you talk about meeting people, that's a large part of the conversations you end up having versus necessarily diving into, okay, here's entrepreneurial 101, business, you know, all those types of things. So it's a fun conversation to have. But my point being is, at what point do you really start to say, okay, this is who I am, this is my core, this is what I'm good at. I might enjoy these other things, but this really is what I'm good at. How can I farm these out and build those relationships?
I find that in groups, like there's a lot of value in just kind of getting something out there. You know, even if it's a really crappy logo, because then somebody who's better at it will be like, no, you got, and then suddenly you have a good logo just because you kind of half-assed did something. Yeah, I think that there's value in, you know, trying to do enough, because I think that attracts people, and it's kind of like gets back to like a management philosophy that I got to with Yolo. People kept on coming to me with problems, you know, with the yogurt machine's doing this or making that noise or when the, you know, whatever. And I finally said, all right, we have a new rule. You cannot come to me with a problem unless you've also thought about it for just long enough to at least have some crappy proposed solution. I don't care if it's good, you know, but just let me know you've at least thought about how to fix the problem before, you know. And people are attracted to that. People, I think, are attracted to, you know, when you've at least tried to come up with a solution to something. You know, that shows that you really care. You're not just asking for something from nothing. You know, you've tried. You put something of yourself, you know, into it. And whether or not it's good is kind of beyond your control. But you know, I think that helps build relationships.
So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So,
I'm actually going to be writing a paper on this later, and I was wondering, how did you react when Yolo in certain places didn't work out, and were you really discouraged by it?
So the question is, how did you react when the Yolo's locations didn't work out, and were you discouraged by it?
Yeah, I mean, it's emotionally, it's sad, it's hard. I mean, you have to go there. It's like a funeral. You're like pulling out all the stuff, you know, that you put in. You were all excited, and you know, I mean, it was really sad. Like I probably cried, you know, like when I was doing it.
Make sure when you say that he did cry. I'm just kidding.
I don't know, because I had guys with me, and I'm like, you know, trying to act like it wasn't hard, but it was. I mean, it was really. I mean, you put a lot of yourself into opening a business, and you know, when it doesn't work out, it's really emotionally difficult. And but you know, I mean, you just try to learn from it. Like I said, I mean, I really feel like I have a deep understanding now of real estate and retail. You know, but it took a long time. I mean, it's really, you know, it took a long time to feel like that's worth anything compared to the loss I felt in failing.
When you talk about, I've noticed that you kind of, there's some common threads when you start things. You sort of go in, you see a need, you get a bunch of people together, start something, and you kind of move on to the next thing. So talk about like, how do you motivate and inspire those people to come together and work together, and then so they're working together enough so you can kind of spin and do something else. I think that's a really unique thing. Most entrepreneurs take on every task themselves, and they don't really seek other people, but it sounds like you kind of come in and sort of make this whirlpool and then let it go and then kind of work on something else. So talk about how do you view projects like that. You might not see it as like a lifer project, it's something you're going to get in and start and then maybe move on.
That's a good analogy. So the idea is, you know, whereas instead of taking on everything as an entrepreneur, you actually pull people in, the whirlpool analogy, pull them into the project, and then you either move on or
the vision.
Yeah,
Like, all right, you got it. All right.
And motivate people.
Yeah, so how do you motivate people
With
is
no
the
money.
question. With no money, right.
Passion.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't force people to have passion. You can't really even, you know, pay people to be good employees. I mean, I try to treat people I work with like they were volunteers, you know, and just try to really deeply respect them. that's kind of my part. That and being able to talk coherently about a vision, that's the limit of what I can do. As far as, whether the right people are attracted, I mean, generally if you talk to enough people, that's kind of just the rule. Like they're kind of pulled, something in them is pulled towards the particular project, and they, either take it and run with it or not. And if they don't, then you kind of work with more people. But I mean, that's really all it's been. I mean, I try to just really treat people with respect and listen to them and get enough of them in one room that it takes with some people, And if I mean, I had a lot of projects, but there's, 5 times as many that just didn't work, and they may sound at some time later. But I don't try to. I've never tried to force something. I really have that kind of philosophy in business. If it's not really working out, then don't try to force it. If the right people aren't coming together, if the vision's not clear, if something happens, I mean, it's this weird line between like persevering, towards your goal and realizing when, that maybe your energy would be spent elsewhere. And there's no real formula to determining that other than just kind of doing it again and again and again. But I think when the idea is good and you've been able to articulate a clear vision, then the right people tend to come, and if you treat them right, they stay.
So we have time for one more question. So one more question.
How do you go, what do you think you learned as far as picking real estate from the failed Yolos?
So the question is, what did you learn from real estate in terms of failures and success, but ultimately, what did you learn from real estate?
I mean, the big part of it is that, at least from a retailer, it's hard to create a lot of your own momentum. The first store we picked was in Collierville on the town square, and I picked it really for sentimental reasons, because I was like, you people live in Collierville, this kind of stinks out here, but this is this one cool place. It's got history and trees, and it's beautiful. Why wouldn't you all want to come here all the time? But that store's still open, but it's never been a good performer. It's kind of still open for sentimental reasons. But the ones, we kind of tried to do that again for the store. The first closure we had was in Jonesboro. Okay, let's go downtown. Let's restart the downtown. Let's be part of this. And I mean, it was kind of, again, it was trying to get people to do something that they weren't really into. There was other problems that we kind of ignored, like parking and proximity to schools and things like that. And you just, as much as you want to be a trendsetter in retail, a lot of time you kind of have to kind of go with the established spots where people are going, especially when you're starting out. As much as you want to change behavior, it's really difficult.
Location, location, location.
Yeah.
That's why people talk about it all the time. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this. I know Taylor will stick around for just a little bit longer, but greatly appreciate everybody for the questions and for being here today and tonight. And Taylor, big hand for Taylor Berger, everybody.
Thanks a lot, y'all.